Live. Good evening. Welcome, everyone. Welcome once again to the Connect Africa, the weekly session where we discuss what happened, weekly. Today we are going to, the topic is celebrating the African nations unite, the votes that they have as one nation. During the 51st meeting, during the Human Rights Council meeting, which just ended last week on 7th October. So to discuss that, we have here with us, we have the honor to have Her Excellency Ambassador Mahalet Hailu, who is a deputy at the mission of Ethiopia in Geneva, the permanent mission of Ethiopia in Geneva, and Dr. Binyam Misgun from Eritrea, but currently based in South Africa. And then we have our permanent analyst, Lambert Ibito, from Uganda. Welcome, everyone. You are muted, I think.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Marlet.
All right.
Welcome, everybody. Glad to have you around.
So, do you want me to proceed, or?
Yeah. So what we are going to do is first we are going, Her Excellency Ambassador Mahalet will do the introduction part for us, just to walk us through, since she's working there as a deputy head of the mission of Ethiopia in Geneva, which has been working on the matter consistently, or who has been engaged constantly until this thing is ended. Just walk us through how it has been like, to mobilize, the African nation behind this, and how, although that Ethiopia lost in a way that the resolution has been adopted, meaning that's against Ethiopia's interest, but still the victory for Africa, for the African nation to come in one vote or in one voice. It's something that we need to celebrate regardless of what happened. Just walk us through the process, and maybe we will have a question, and just give us background. Yeah, the floor is yours, Ambassador.
Sure. Thank you so much. I would like to first of all thank you for this opportunity, for having me here, and be able to address you all. As per the direction you just gave, I would like to briefly touch upon the historical background of this meeting. As you know, last December, there was a special session of the Human Rights Council, which gave birth to this International Commission of Human Rights Experts on Ethiopia. So this commission of experts were established through the resolution that was adopted last December for a period of 1 year. December, usually it's a special session, so it's not a regular session of the Human Rights Council. Therefore, the EU and their partners decided to renew the mandate of the commissioners, as it is going to end this coming December. So this resolution was mainly to renew the mandate of the International Commission of Human Rights Experts on Ethiopia. Since its establishment, you know very well that they have orally updated the council, and they have presented their written report at this session. We, as Ethiopia, has tried on several occasions to meet with these experts, although we have clearly rejected the resolution. We tried to meet with the experts in order to see ways and means, a possibility to agree on the modalities of cooperation with the commissioners. Unfortunately, after several meetings were held here in Geneva and in Ethiopia, we were not able to reach an agreement. We were dismayed, but unfortunately, the commissioners stood their ground and wanted to really do what they had all along intended to do. As you can see from the report, this report is a substandard report. It's politically motivated. The Ethiopian government has provided its written comments on the advanced copy that it was submitted to. So in detail, we have paragraph by paragraph commented on the various allegations which did not have evidence as per the standards of reporting submitted by this International Commission of Experts. That is why, from the very beginning, Ethiopia rejected the renewal of the mandate of the commissioners. The commissioners had ample time within 1 year to finish the work they wanted, but unfortunately, they had proven to be a political instrument all along. They failed to conduct their duty, and their credibility was actually questioned because everything was clear. The political intention was clear. They even went beyond their mandate to reach upon the UN Security Council. So all this have on several occasions been disputed through the press releases and comments from our missions. Now, as far as the renewal of the mandate is concerned, our opposition was clearly indicated from the very beginning. This was not only the work of the mission, but it was a concerted effort from the headquarters, along with various missions spread all around the world. It is not only the credit of the Ethiopian mission here in Geneva, but the whole diplomatic circle. Everybody lobbied and reached out to various countries, particularly members of the Human Rights Council, to explain in detail what the Ethiopian government has been doing to ensure accountability and the national efforts underway, explaining what has been doing since the joint investigation report of the Ethiopian Human Rights Commission and the UN OHCHR Commission report has been submitted. Although, as you know, we had some serious reservations, we have accepted the report and we were working on the implementation of the recommendations. So all those were really explained to various members of the council, and basically their votes attest to the fact that many countries, particularly Africans, and those also who abstained, because in actual fact they denied their vote to support the renewal of the mandate. So many countries, through their vote, expressed their support to the national efforts underway, but also to the work that the Ethiopian government is accomplishing in terms of ensuring accountability, and also its commitment to resolve the conflict in northern Ethiopia through an AU-led process. So instead of politicizing the Human Rights Council, these countries supported first the national efforts, second expressed clearly their preference to the AU-led peace process underway, and also somehow expressed their opinions, or their how should I put it, their disagreement with the political nature of the whole process, and because these instruments are being used against Ethiopia when Ethiopia clearly indicated that it has the necessary mechanisms, necessarily national institutions to provide, to ensure accountability, to do the necessary effort to implement the recommendation of the joint investigation that was carried out by the Ethiopian Human Rights Commission and UN OHCHR. So in short, this was what we have been clearly lobbying for. As you know, as you have seen from the numbers, there were 19 votes against this resolution and 21 in favor. So the 2 votes margin clearly discredited the resolution. One, clearly showed that the sponsors of the resolution have been using the ICHRE, that is the International Commission of Human Rights Experts on Ethiopia, as a political tool to attain their objectives. So this is really what has the meaning of the votes behind. Even though the Human Rights Council do not register the abstention, if you add the 7 abstentions together with the 19 votes that were casted against this resolution, overwhelmingly it surpasses the 21 votes of the sponsors of this resolution. So definitely Ethiopia called to the members of the council to support its national efforts, and AU-led peace process has worked. So the effort does not stop here. We still have a long way to go, and we will keep on lobbying these countries and showing that what is being done on the ground. As you can see, as far as the AU peace process is concerned, the Ethiopian government has already written back saying that it is ready for that. And this has always been the position of the government. It was ready to any peace efforts under the AU-led peace process. And maybe you have seen it also, the report of the Interministerial Task Force is out. So these are the efforts that are being done on the ground. International community need to understand that the Ethiopian government is doing its level best to ensure accountability on the ground and bring the perpetrators of the violations, of the alleged violations, to justice. Let me stop here, and if you have any other clarifications or questions, I'll be happy to respond to those. Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador, indeed, for that brief background. It will really help us and our audience also to understand, the situation or what's happening exactly. I do have a question, definitely, but first let's give a chance to our next speakers. Next is Dr. Binyam Misgun. He's a lecturer at KwaZulu-Natal University. I hope I said it right, in South Africa, in Durban. And he's here with us to share, he's from Eritrea, so the experience of Eritrea in a way that for us to have a better understanding. The whole aim of this platform is also to better understanding and to take the lessons learned and how can we capitalize on it. So welcome once again, Dr. Binyam, Brother Binyam, I would rather say, and the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. And Ambassador, she gave us such a wonderful insight into what was happening behind those closed doors. So we only see the drama and the fronts, yeah. And I think we should recognize that human rights are very important. We all embrace it. We all agree to it. It's not something that Europeans are pushing on us, and we embrace it. That there are a tradition in our communities that embrace that we recognize our humanity, we respect each other. We want to take accountability for the things that happen to us in our community. Any violation, we despise it. But this assertion that Europeans have or the West has the upper hand over that, over this, and want to push down on us is something that we should reject. What we are saying here is that it should not be politicized. We all have shortcomings. And Eritrea went through this process, of course, in relation to the human rights concern that they said is allegedly taking place in Eritrea. And we know it wasn't much about the human rights. It was about harassing the nation, politicizing it so that you continue to demonize that state, arm twist. And in fact, those rapporteurs or commissions that they establish, they go beyond their duty and mandate to interfere in other spaces. Just to give you an example, the person that was put as the chair of the Commission of Inquiry for Eritrea is a terrorism, counterterrorism expert. He's not a lawyer, just a counterterrorism expert. But it tells you something about it. Why was he there? Yeah, and of course we know that in Eritrea, what they did was with the sanction in relation to Eritrea's alleged involvement in Somalia at the UN Security Council it wasn't tenable. And so what they did was at the fallback position, they instituted this human rights rapporteur. And once you have that, it just never goes away. So they established the rapporteur, and it didn't work out for them. Then they went for COR, Commission of Inquiry, in 2014, and then 2016 they released the report. And in all those case making against Eritrea and demonizing Eritrea, Eritreans have tried to mobilize themselves, send their information, their details, but the Commission of Inquiry was not going to entertain it. In fact, the UN office there at Geneva was overwhelmed with the kind of letters that we're receiving, over 100,000, I think, at some point. And they said, no, we're not going to accept anything, And then they dismissed them as government organization. But then they would be bringing in NGOs that they fund, that would receive a table, spatial table pay. And all the civil society we have, they're not going to be afforded the space to make their case at those forums. And it tells you so much about how those arrangements are skewed to those who have significant power over those institutions, and particularly those who have the resource and the means. Yeah, the NGOs are funded by the West. We know that. The UN is significantly funded by the West. We know that. And all those inquiries are funded by them as well. So therefore, they tend to have a significant clout on those institutions and commissions that are often established. Yeah. So Eritrea rejected year in, year out, and insisted upon the only way to make human rights visible for all of us is through universal periodic review. Yeah, which is accepted by most states. We lead the process. We first assess our own situation, recognize what's our shortcomings. We're not saying that we fully respecting all human rights aspect, or there are shortcomings and there are mistakes that happen, and we'll try to rectify them, and we want to rectify them, but we need to be supported and we need to lead the process. If somebody else is shoving down your throat something, it's unlikely to be accepted, yeah? And the resistance will be a lot more stronger. So Eritrea had insisted on that, but the UN Human Rights Commission been reluctant to accept it. And of course, those countries that constantly reject that is the West and their allies, constantly. And of course, and I think we've seen that the slight shift. Eritrea is also part of, has joined the Human Rights Council as well, and an attempt to be in the inside and trying to influence it from the inside, learn something from it, contribute something from it as well. And many African states are doing that as well. But we know when it comes to vote, they try to lobby them, not only lobby them, use aid and other support that they give them as a leverage. You know, if you vote along with us, we offer you a BCD. If you vote along with us, then the aid, you know, you would receive this aid and that aid. That's how they had been manipulating other states, and particularly African states had been vulnerable to that kind of manipulation, bullying, you know, the carrot and the stick approach that they always have. And this somehow suggests to me that, you know, those organizations and this kind of institution that we have as a universal and global establishment, it is becoming an extension of their foreign policy, for a platform through which they push their foreign interests. And this comes very clearly when you look at the number of countries that are already under investigation by the UN. There are 11 of them, and only qualifies to be investigated, and that's with that kind of severity. The rest are just the West hasn't liked them. They're too close to China or Russia, or you know, one or another reason that they want to influence process at the local level. And in fact, the one that is responsible should be investigated, America walked away in protest because it felt that, you know, its favorite country is being harassed. And other Europeans countries have been also been dismayed by this process for some reason and protesting against it. But whenever it is Congo, DRC has been mentioned, Ethiopia or Eritrea has been mentioned, they always, you know, hammering at us, and always, you know, want to present themselves as defenders of human rights. Yeah. So when it suits them, they defend us. When it doesn't, then they want to trespass the process or arm twist the process. So I think it's very important that we recognize those challenges, and we know that we want to ensure accountability. We want to learn to do it. We want our institutions to be afforded the space to be able to account for those issues. Yeah, and Africa is coming to the party. Yeah, it's not a bystander. It wants to take charge, but not bullied and be pushed left and right center in order to meet Western standard of what human rights should be. We understand it, we respect it, and the way we respect it, the way we understand it, should be also be recognized. And we don't expect everybody to embrace it, but at least we have our own ways, manners, and institutions that would be able to deal with those challenges. We recognize those are challenges, and the remedy can only come from within. And if there is any support we need, then we can go out and ask for them. But then they want to come as a party to it. Yeah, both the funders, prescribers, and demanding all that, it's not going to work. And I think we should see that those days are gone. Yeah, where issues are dictated on us. They define the problem for us. They prescribe the solution for us. They provide the resource that would make this happen for us. It's no longer there. It's not a tenable arrangement, and many African states are already rejecting that. And you could clearly see in this outcome that we saw with regards to Ethiopia. All of them except Malawi rejected it, rightfully so. Yeah, and if Malawi had voted no, then it would have been a tie, clearly. and of course, if you add all the others, then it's a predominantly rejected. They can take home whatever they want, but in the end, it's not a popular vote. It's not a popular commission, and many of the commissions are not popular either, to be exact. I'll leave it here. Thank you very much for the opportunity.
Thank you very much, Dr. Binam, indeed, for that. I really hope that those days are gone. I mean, Eritrea has been doing it for decades. And then this just exemplar act, what just happened last week in Ethiopia, resisting for the last 2 years. And then the whole Ukraine-Russia war, what it unfolded in front of us, with regards to Africans saying no, that they say you cannot choose our friends or who we can be friended with. There's a lot of signals that has been sent to the West, whether they're going to take it and take a lesson from it, that, time will tell. It's in question. We're going to pass to our last speaker here, but of course the session will not end here. Lambert Ebitu. So he will share with us how we can, because usually our struggles, our challenges are so much that even, the little victories that we get, they just pass by and we don't even pay attention, and, without taking the lesson, without capitalizing on it, we miss the chance. So Lambert, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mallet. Thank you for giving me the floor. And then a big thank you to the previous speakers, Ambassador, the namesake of Mallet, Ambassador Mallet. I think we are meeting for the we're meeting for the first time. I'm also meeting Milan for the first time, and it's a good thing. We have Ethiopia, we have Eritrea, and then we have Ethiopia. The other day, when the president of Kenya was in Ethiopia, I think by the time he left, Kenya had signed Safaricom, which is a Kenyan company, had signed a contract with had gotten a license to operate in Ethiopia. And I remember telling a friend that we're beginning to see a kind of, what we would desire to see within Africa, some kind of integration. We can begin through technology. And then, of course, maybe eventually we shall not have borders. And next time we meet, perhaps shall be speaking as one country. Of course, that's our Pan-African vision. Now, carrying on, Mallet, from where you position me, I like to acknowledge the observations that Ambassador has made, and then also which have been reinforced by Binlam. One of the things I've kept telling people, I think from time way back when we first, Ambassador told us, reminded us, the genesis of this International Commission of Human Rights Experts. Of course, it goes back to last year, I think around December, when it was first established. But I think what for me is of significance is the circumstances. It's of significance in the sense that it begins to give us a picture of the goal as to why these kind of organizations, this kind of thing was established. You remember, upon its establishment in 2021 December, it was, I think, 1 month just after the Ethiopian Human Rights Commission released its joint report with the UN, and just 1 month after that is when this International Commission of Human Rights Experts was established. Now, for me, that's significant because it comes on the backdrop of the findings of an organization that has basically carried out the same investigations for which you want this new organization, this new body to come and investigate. But also, so that tells us that perhaps the findings of the Ethiopian Human Rights Commission did not exactly match with the predetermined interests and bias of the West, in terms of their results. So they thought we need something else which can give us the kind of results that we want, which of course tells you that these kind of organizations are not put in place, with a fair mind. They usually brought in the way the ambassador told us, with a sense of politicization, and I would dare add that an extension of, kind of neocolonialism, within the human rights bodies of the UN. But also, I would like to remind us that both times, that was in 2011, when the International Commission of Human Rights, this Commission of Human Rights Experts was formed, and also the other day on the 7th when its mandate was extended. Both times, the resolution has been sponsored by outsiders. I would have been surprised, and perhaps it would seem to make sense that people seem to think there is an urgency and need to have human rights investigated in Ethiopia if one day we wake up and this kind of resolution is brought forward and sponsored by an African country. Now, that also is significant because it then tells us that why is it each time it is non-Africans who have to bring forward these resolutions, when we Africans who are closer to Ethiopia and who would be more affected by the human rights abuses in Ethiopia, if they be there, should be the ones who are more interested and should be the first to bring forward these kind of resolutions. So what does this all speak, to Africa, and perhaps going forward, what are the lessons that it gives us? It tells us that the West continues to try to use human rights bodies to try and weaponize these kind of bodies, use them, politicize them in a sense as to continue subduing, African countries. I thought, you remember, I think about a month ago, or at least the last few weeks before the other day, when the mandate was extended, I read a number of letters by some African-based, human rights organizations, open letters to the UN asking them to extend, the mandate of this. And what was surprising, I did a background check on some of these organizations, and because in their letters, like I think one was by the International Justice something that is based in Sudan. Then also something, about 2 or 3 wrote open letters, and they were asking that they should extend the mandate of this International Commission of Human Rights Experts. And in asking that they should extend this mandate, they made a particular appeal to African countries. They said, we particularly appeal African countries to support the extension of this mandate. Now, what I'm trying to raise this is that there is a desire by either these organizations based in Africa, which despite being based in Africa, are not actually African organizations because they receive about 90% or more of their funding from the West. So regardless of the opinion that they give, even when they are based in Africa, they are basically parroting the demands and the talking points of Washington and other Western countries. But what's interesting, of course, and that has brought us here, Malit has called it a celebration, is the response of the African countries, despite the pressure from these organizations, but mostly, despite the pressure from the Europeans. Of course, like my brother Bin Lam indicated, it is now routine that whenever there is an occasion for the world to take sides on a given matter, an international matter, it is now routine that the West will always try to coerce African countries, try to pressure them using its means and leverages, including aid and all those kind of leverages, to try and take sides and vote in favor with the West. But it is therefore significant that on this particular occasion, yes, I think all of them, there's no African country that voted in favor of extending the mandate, which is very significant. Ambassador Ambassador took part of the credit for their work in Geneva, but also gave some credit, of course, to the whole diplomatic structure of Ethiopia, in doing the good work to ensure that Africa stood as one. But also, I think beyond the good work that the diplomatic community of Ethiopia has done in making it clear to its African counterparts that this is not necessary and we can handle this matter, or we already have structures in place that can handle the same, the same responsibilities for which they are apparently trying to establish and extend the mandate of this International Commission of Human Rights Experts in Ethiopia. I think that beyond the work done by the diplomatic community, I would like to appreciate and perhaps acknowledge what I consider a kind of awakening within the African continent, that we can handle these matters on our own. Of course, the diplomats of Ethiopia have done a good job, but I also think that there is a sense of of understanding, a kind of awakening, if you follow the patterns of voting. Even in 2021, when this commission was first established, I remember the majority of African countries actually voted against it. Now, this time it is not just the majority, it is all of them. So if that's one step forward, I think it's a very significant step. And as you indicate, Mallet, it is something that we need to celebrate, because it begins to set a precedent that African countries don't necessarily have to side with anybody, but have to stand on their feet. Like the previous speakers have made so clear. It is not that Africans don't like human rights. It is not that we are alien to human rights, but also it is not correct for the West to act as the gold standard of human rights. We love ourselves enough to understand that we need to live humanely with ourselves. But then it has become, of course, a norm that now we have the West, I like to call it the US-led West, weaponizing these human rights organizations. And I think that the International Commission of Human Rights Experts in Ethiopia is particularly been established to maintain pressure on the Ethiopian government. The ambassador gave an indication that what is it that this commission has not been able to do in the last 1 year, that it now desires to do in the next 1 year. That therefore makes it for me plain that there is not much that this commission has been established to do, but rather to present one of the pressure points based on which they can continue to pressure the government in Addis Ababa to either toe their line or to continuously either listen to them or bow down to a pressure from the West. So it is something that I would like to see us celebrate. It is something that for me is significant in the new awakening for Africa. Perhaps countries that have suffered more than even Ethiopia in recent times, I think the classic example is where my brother Binlam comes from, Eritrea. The West likes to call you people, they call you the North Korea of Africa. And they have all their things that they throw at Eritrea, all the propaganda that they put on Eritrea. And I think that Eritrea has been one of the longest victims of this kind of arrangements, this kind of politicization of human rights structures within the UN. But then, of course, with this kind of precedent being set at this time, I think we have moved a step forward. If the majority of the African countries, for example, voted against it in 2021, this time all of them voted still against it. So I think it's a step forward, and countries like Eritrea and of course others within Africa that have been demonized and against which the West has chosen to use human rights organizations to demonize, can begin to see a breath of fresh air, a kind of belief that perhaps for once Africans are finally beginning to take charge of their own affairs. Africans are finally beginning to see that we can have solutions. Because for me, the rejection of the extension of this mandate is an endorsement of the structures and organizations within Ethiopia. It's an endorsement and a declaration that we believe the Ethiopian government has the structures within Ethiopia. We believe not only Ethiopia, but of course led by the AU and within Africa, we can handle the matters that are taking place within Ethiopia. So that endorsement is significant because it has become something that the West continues to pump in our heads. They believe that we must always get the approval of the West in whatever we do. And it extends to all spheres of life within Africa. From the politics, when you do an election, and it has become so viral that, for example, you can do an election in a country, and even the people in that country are waiting for the endorsement from the West in order to actually accept that what they have done is worth it, and therefore it qualifies as democracy. Should the West not endorse it, it somehow doesn't qualify as democracy. So, like I said, all spheres of life within the African continent have been, affected with that kind of mentality. But I think this demonstrates that for once, African leaders are beginning to acknowledge that we have a responsibility among ourselves, that we don't need the endorsement, we don't need to first to be recommended by the West in order to handle our own matters. So it's a leap forward for me, for Africa. It's significant, but not to become so excited because it is one small win, and yes, we celebrate it. But I think for Ethiopia, it is significant. Of course, we lost the mandate has been extended, but it's also a vote of confidence that Ethiopia has the capacity and African Union has the capacity to handle human rights matters within Ethiopia. We don't need the policing of the West. We don't need them to come and do it themselves. But of course, like I said, that coming from the basis, the very foundation that led to the formation of this commission, it is clear that that perhaps the interest is not really, the interest is not to document human rights abuses in Ethiopia, because we already have organizations doing that. And if you're saying you don't trust them, why is it you who does not trust them, you who does not live in Africa? Why is it that other countries within Africa that are closer to Ethiopia, that share borders with Ethiopia, that share a continent with Ethiopia, and that should be more concerned with what happens in Ethiopia, seem not to share the same sentiment that the West seems to have over Ethiopia? So it's a weaponization of these human rights organizations. And Ethiopia, like I said, isn't the first country to suffer this. I think it is just one of those countries. But I think, as before, Ethiopia has handled it a lot better diplomatically, because usually other countries just enter into outbursts and enter into this kind of diplomatic roles. But I think Ethiopia has managed to continue to undertake diplomatic engagements, not only within Africa, but also with the same people, even when they know underneath that there seems to be a different objective for which these organizations are set up. So it's a vote of confidence, Mallet. I think that for me is a good direction. But like I said, as I conclude, it is one drop in the ocean. There is going to be a lot more that Africans need to do, and I know that the pressure will continue to ramp up. The extension of the mandate of this commission will not serve as much, because I don't know, have they had a written report on anything to do with whatever they have documented in 1 year? I think not yet. Ambassador said they have they've kept making oral presentations or something like that. And I suspect, if I may prophesy, maybe within the year, depending on how issues turn out within Ethiopia, depending on how the politics of Ethiopia, the politics of engagement between the West and the government in Addis Ababa proceeds in the next few months, you are most likely to see a ramp up of pressure again on the government of Ethiopia. And one of the weapons they're going to use is perhaps a report, this time by this same organization, this time bedeviling the government of Ethiopia. Of course, maybe it won't happen as such, but I can only prophesy and think that going by precedent, this usually happens. Thank you, Malid.
Thank you very much, Lambert, for that. Really, yeah, indeed, what we take out of this is, regardless of what happened, it's a vote of confidence for Africa, and there is a lot to learn. So now here we come to the question session. So I'm going to go and ask a question, Ambassador. One of the things, of course, you all can comment on it. One of the things that, the last 2 years has taught us as an Ethiopian or as an African is that the ability and the capacity of the Ethiopian government to mobilize its own people inside and out, regardless of differences, political differences or anything, that capacity, that ability, and then also, to stick together to these Pan-African values, even when the AU didn't have the experience to solve this kind of conflicts on such level. We can take the example of the Grand Renaissance Dam, which is a disputed one with the downstream countries. And then also now it's the conflict when Ethiopia said, first and foremost, it's internally it should be solved, but if any other party should be involved, then it should be only the African Union. So that thing by itself is, I think it has put now a precedent for the African Union and also for other African countries who will face the same problem. It's kind of a guideline it has set up. Now I want you to ask, there were, I think, 14 resolutions that has been adopted, including Ethiopia. I mean, this 51st meeting of the Human Rights Council. And I have seen the others were not detailed. There was one on Burundi, and I just tried to check the vote for in favor and then against. So it didn't bring that same, result, the way that the Ethiopian diplomacy has worked. Maybe Ethiopia, among with other African diplomats, has worked, has done its homework well, and other didn't do. But and there will be also other situation like this. What do you say? Departing from what we have come so far and gaining that confidence, we can always bring it to our African nation or to the African Union, and then what we can do in the future in similar situation for Ethiopia and also for other African countries.
If I may, I don't think it's right to compare one resolution against another. Each case is different from one country to another. As far as Ethiopia is concerned, if we start from the genesis of the resolution, as my brother said, this resolution was not only unacceptable, the political intention of the establishment of the commission was clearly before our eyes and before the eyes of the council members. So they knew from the very beginning that there was a genuine national efforts underway, one. Two, the resolution that even established the commissioners requested the commissioners to build upon the joint investigation report that was already done and to ensure complementarity, right? So all these were not respected. So these were the two items that we emphasized on, that the Africans emphasized on, that the resolution emphasized on. Instead of continuing on the allegation on when the joint investigation stopped, that is June 28, the commissioners wanted to reinvestigate what has already been investigated. So they wanted to arrive at their own conclusion without setting their foot on the ground through media reports and etc. They just based their conclusions, and that's why we said it's a substandard report. And secondly, the members of the council, recognizing the national efforts underway, understood that this renewal of the mandate will clearly undermine the national efforts that are already underway to ensure accountability, redress victims, and therefore that is what they oppose to. Secondly, as you can see from the resolution, the EU and their partners, who of course sponsored this resolution, completely overlooked the national efforts, completely ignored the work that has already been on the ground. So, all this also have a weight on how countries really portray themselves, defend their positions, and they see that behind all this, there is a political motivation behind the establishment of the council, behind the renewal of the council or the commission, as my brother said. But Mahalet, as you rightly put it, we should recognize the effort of the diaspora, the effort of the African diaspora. In this DNA age where you have all these technologies, be it YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, and all the artificial intelligence on your lap, it's easy to reach out to various members of the committee, and also this in turn can reach out to their representatives on the ground. And this has to be duly recognized because they have done tremendous efforts in setting the record straight and explaining to their constituencies what is really happening on the ground, and clearly explaining, because many of the news that we see now are really most of the time skewed in one direction, right? So these people who see the news might not see the reality on the ground. I remember for myself when I traveled to Ethiopia, some foreign colleagues were surprised that I was going to Ethiopia. They think that Ethiopia is full of problems, and unless you bring this news out, unless you explain what is really happening on the ground, people will not realize, people will not see the truth. So I would like to really recognize the effort of the African diaspora in explaining the realities on the ground. So with that, I think I have taken a lot. I will stop there. Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador. You may have Lambert or Dr. Biniam, you want to add on this, but I will ask, I have a question for Dr. Biniam. The last 2 years, one of the things that did to me as an African was actually to look into much closer, to such issues, how these human rights things are, weaponized to punish African leaders and their countries, to destabilize. I always say, okay, Ethiopia is, fighting this war alone. But of course, we have our Pan-African brothers and sisters. But I think of Eritrea, and then I imagine, oh my God, for decades, how they have been fighting alone. And do you think, and I'm sure other African sisters and brothers share my view, it also, what it unfolded, what's happening in Ethiopia in the last 2 years is also have kind of enlightened people, what has been done to, even as far as we go to Libya, and then for decades against Eritrea. Do you think what's happening now in general, this vote of confidence and other things, we have gained a lot of things. It's just because we are trolling every time in challenges, we don't recognize them. Will change the approach next time, whenever such things happen in air. I know it's an ongoing issue, of course. Do you think it will set a tone, a different tone? Dr. Binia? Okay. I tried to unmute you, but I cannot. It's freezed, right? Okay, until maybe it's a connection problem. Lambert, maybe you can come in if you have something to share.
Thank you, Malet. Maybe back as we wait for the lamp to come in, hopefully it comes back. There is not much I would add. It's just the similar emphasis that we need to do a lot more as Africans. First, to diagnose and see the intentions for which organizations, human rights organizations, and not only human rights but different kinds of organizations are established by the West within the ambit of the UN and deployed to become weapons for controlling and piling pressure on African governments and leveraging the interests of the West within Africa. And I think human rights organizations are have specifically served quite well for the West. We look back to all other countries, even whether you want to go back to 2011 in Libya and how the human rights organizations were involved, in doctoring. I like to say doctor because some of them have over time been proven to have been false. Doctoring reports, adding to the public pressure and building a sense of negativity towards a particular leader. And one thing I would like to do, maybe one observation that's very important to make, is that one of the tactics and the manner in which these organizations operate, once they have been given the underneath objective of piling pressure on a given country, is that they isolate a particular leader. It is not so often that they would say they put the blame wholesome on the government of Ethiopia. Even if you notice now, or in the bulk of the narrative, of human rights abuse seems to always go to a particular person within the government of Ethiopia, and that is to the Prime Minister of Ethiopia. They are always going to isolate one particular person, because they while they operate as an organization, they want to make it appear as if whatever accusation has been made against a particular government, for example, is piled upon and a responsibility put on the head of a specific leader. Because then in so doing, I think the idea usually is to try and isolate that leader, from the public and present that person as a bad person. I remember after the last the 2021 findings of the Ethiopian Human Rights Commission, the government of Ethiopia, while it didn't agree entirely, just as the ambassador also re-emphasized, actually committed and said we are going to look into these issues which have been raised, and we are going to see that how do we resolve them in case they've really been, some of them have been happening. But you will notice that, so what that means is that the government operates as a unit, and it is not impossible that individuals within a government, or if it's within the armed forces, are always going to behave without necessarily having to behave. I mean, you can't put their behavior to be the overall position of the government in place. So what am I saying? There will always be instances, for example, of human rights abuse by individuals. The most important thing for governments, not only in Ethiopia, but not only in Africa anyhow, because throughout the world, is that you've got to look at this kind of atrocities and bring those who have been implicated, to justice. And I think the government of Ethiopia has shown a willingness to do that. I remember after that report came out, they committed to do that, and I think over time they have done that. But as usual, and as I've indicated, what the West does is they deflect the whole pressure on a particular person within their country. And in this particular case, I see them trying to paint a specific picture and personality of the prime minister of Ethiopia to be this devious person who is bad and who is leading, in the abuse of human rights within Africa. But also it is a vote of confidence, and I think a blessing for Africa, that perhaps, okay, while of course in Ethiopia, Ethiopians are feeling bad, Ethiopians are suffering, but I think that it is good that what the West is doing this time around, it is doing it to Ethiopia, because in a sense, Ethiopia is managing to handle it at the different fronts, even at a diplomatic front. And in so handling it the way it's handling, it seems to be opening the eyes of African countries. It is very difficult to deal with the pressure that Ethiopia is dealing with and remain sober. It is difficult to deal with the pressure that Ethiopia is dealing with and continue to engage the international community and in fact score some victories like this one. Because the way the Ethiopian government has handled it, you notice the way they handle it at a diplomatic level, the responses they make, the effort they make, and now you begin to see the fruits in this kind of voting, where you see the broader African countries, and like the ambassador explained, in fact, the majority of the UN Council, Human Rights Council, was actually against for example, the continuation, the extension of the mandate of this body that's been established to oversee and document human rights in Ethiopia. So I think it is good that it's in Ethiopia, because Ethiopia seems to have that history and the will and the capacity to withstand the kind of pressure that usually the West puts on the country and cripples it, because it comes militarily, it comes from from a psychological point of view of human rights. It is put upon a leader. Also, you see, we are dealing with a leader who won the Nobel Peace Prize not only a long time ago. So that's not somebody whose past you're going to dig up and try to use as a basis for benevoling him today. They have tried their best to try and present the Prime Minister of Ethiopia to the world now as a bad person. But I like to ask people who now think that Prime Minister Abiy is this human rights abuser. I like to ask them that, aren't you the same people who endorsed him only about a few years ago and said he, is a peace champion? What has happened between that time and now? As the devil in him finally come today, and it wasn't there before. So the point is, maybe it is just that he has not entirely obeyed and followed the path that you wanted him to follow. But the point I'm making is that the majority of leaders in Africa usually come to power from a background that allows the West to manipulate and say, see, this one was a rebel leader. From here and here, he became president, and his record is bad. So based on this, we can begin to understand why he's behaving the way he's behaving today. But Prime Minister Abiy's clean record in the past, also presents him to the world in a sense that allows people to judge him a lot more fairly. So Western propaganda and the twisting of facts here and there by organizations like these human rights organizations are not having as strong an effect on Ethiopia as it would have in another country. That's why I said that we are a bit fortunate. Of course, Ethiopia is suffering, but we are fortunate that it's happening in Ethiopia. And I think that perhaps it will trigger a response not only in Ethiopia but throughout Africa in our desire and responsibility and readiness to begin to take responsibility of our own future, of the way we conduct things, of our own standards, because I think that Africa has to stick to its own standards. We don't have a standard to adhere to in the West. We have it within ourselves. So going forward, I think Ethiopia perhaps will one day, has offered itself as a subject in this experiment of the new awakening of Africa as a continent. And I like to see, above else, of course, for me personally, I keep each time I have engagements with Ethiopians, I tell them that you have a responsibility, not only to Africa, but the first responsibility is to yourselves, because you can't celebrate the abuse of human rights. Nobody wants that. And what we can only do as Africans outside Ethiopia is demand and require that we depend on the institutions, unless proven otherwise incapable within Ethiopia, in overseeing and documenting whatever human rights abuses are there. I've stayed away deliberately from trying to apportion blame to either side of the conflict in Ethiopia, but I've focused more, which I believe has been the gist of our discussion, on how much we need to emphasize and to have confidence in the institutions within Ethiopia, and by extension beyond Ethiopia to the institution of the African Union. Because at the end of the day, yesterday we had a discussion, Mallet, and I remember telling you that when shall Africa come of age? We can't have the Ethiopian Human Rights Commission working jointly with the UN and coming up with the findings. Then, because they have come up with the findings that don't seem to confirm the narrative, the predetermined narrative of the Europeans, they decide to create their own and tell us, now we are going to handle this ourselves and help you find out the truth, when indeed we have already found out the truth that's on the ground. So if Africa has been on a learning curve, if our institutions have kept growing, the other day Uganda had independence 60 years, and I was telling you that 60 years is too long a time for the West to tell us that in case they have been teaching us on how to handle matters, for instance, we still haven't learned. So I think that Africa has come of age, and we live at a time, particularly when I think that for once the African Union has got to take responsibility and go beyond the mandate that is in its charters and begin to put it in practice and stand for what it was established to do within Africa. We can't keep allowing the West to dictate and tell us what to do, and keep biasing us and telling us how things are happening. What's funny is that you have writers, for example, in Washington and New York, telling us about what's happening in Ethiopia, and they want us to believe that they're telling the truth more than the African reporter who is, for example, in Ethiopia. You have the UN Council establishing new ones when we have the Ethiopian Human Rights Council that is established within Ethiopia and has been there long enough to give us a broader picture and a much truer picture of what's happening in Ethiopia. So this coming of age, for me, I hope that the Ethiopia, and I think it is doing it already, leads us towards that, and I think we're already going. The response and the positivity being shown by African countries, their capacity, their willingness apparently now to stand with Ethiopia. And just as I go off Mallet, I want again to emphasize that this vote was significant in so many ways. It is significant because it is a bold statement. Perhaps, well, of course, they have renewed the mandate, but the statement to the West is very bold, that we're not going to listen to you, on this, because we believe that Ethiopia can handle this. But from a broader perspective, it's a vote of confidence in our capacity to handle our matters. And I would like to see the African Union carry on from there.
If I may, Mahilet, this is a very important point that has been raised by our brother, the principle of subsidiarity. I think the Human Rights Council should not undermine national institutions. The experience of the joint investigation that was already done by the Human Rights Commission of Ethiopia and the High Commissioner's Office would have served as an example for various other countries. Unfortunately, this is not what is the case right now, but Ethiopia will continue implementing the recommendation of the joint investigation. And as has been said, I cannot re-emphasize it more. We definitely our commitment to peacefully resolve the conflict without any precondition still has been said time and again, and I would like to re-emphasize it here as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador. Unfortunately, our brother Binyam could not join us because he has an electricity outage, so he could not. It's something that we experience here and there. But regardless, these are minor problems. We try to, I mean, it's a common problem in Africa. So that doesn't stop us from bringing our sisters and brothers to represent what they have to represent, their country, their community. So these are just small things, and we really thank him, even if he's not here, for the time and knowledge he shared with us. Ambassador, just before I end it, it would be wrong for me not to ask this, and just because also Lambert has touched upon it, just like the African Union has taken the matter now into its hands to solve, you know, to solve the problem. This is the AU-led peace negotiation. What about for such things that, you know, when, okay, if they discredit and if they don't accept the institutions, the human rights report by Ethiopian government, how about doing a joint thing with the African Union? Because I know that there is an organ that's based, if I'm not mistaken, in Gambia, the African Union Human Rights Commission, something like that. So yeah, that wasn't possible. Yeah, if you can just, you know, throw a light for us with regards to that, and then your final word, you know, what this whole thing, what kind of statement it will send, and yeah. Thank you. That will be the conclusion of this session.
Thank you so much. Just to briefly say that the invitation was forwarded to the by the Ethiopian government to carry out a joint investigation together with the UN body. So it is the Ethiopian government actually who requested the High Commissioner's Office to carry out the joint investigation together with the Ethiopian Human Rights Commission. Now, even when it has been finalized, a second invitation was forwarded to continue the second part of the joint investigation starting from 28 June 2021 onwards. So far, we have not yet received any response from the High Commissioner's Office. As far as the African body, yes, it exists, and there was some discussion also at the headquarters level. So this is where we are at in terms of next steps. Definitely, it's something that we will be working on together with the headquarters for the next session. As you have seen on the resolution, there are clearly indicated the sessions that would concern us. Since this resolution has passed, there are various issues that will be of concern to our delegation. So I don't think it's right to say everything right here, but definitely we will be focused on that. And let's just say that the work has just started, and we will continue in consultation with the headquarters and various missions to work on this issue. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ambassador, really, for your time and to come and share, walk us that process, walk us through that process in this short notice of time. Really, I thank you, and thank you also, Lambert, for your always usual. Sharing your knowledge, giving us what I love, the historical background. And thank you very much. With that, we end this session. Yeah. Thank you. And I would like to thank our audience as well, who has been here with their comments. They have enjoyed it. Dennis Wilson, Azeb, Teddy G. Thank you all for your comments and thank you for your engagement. Yeah, thank you. Bye-bye, Lambert.